Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX, and we just wrapped up our 2022 250 Shootout. We're here to do our round table. We got 4 of our 6 test riders, myself and Sean Klinger, who are on staff at Vital MX, Chris Siebenhaar and Willie Simons, who help us out with a lot of these tests. They spent all the days of this shootout with us. We all have our individual notes, our opinions. We have our overall score, and we're going to basically break down each bike based on how they finished and see where we agree, where we disagree, because that's part of it. Ultimately, a shootout is a subjective opinion. There's not really a right or a wrong answer at the end of the day. It's just kind of what we think based on our experience and our thoughts, and that's what we're here to share with you. So there's going to be one of these videos on each motorcycle. Make sure you check out all of them if you're really interested in finding out which bike is best for you this year. KTM lost to the Red Brethren by 2 points. Gas was 18 points. KTM is third with 20 points, and the Honda was fourth with 21. Definitely very tight contention. KTM's a little bit more spread out on results. It's got a win. It's got a third, a fourth, a fifth, a third, a fourth. I believe I personally ranked it fourth on my list. It has its goods. It has its bads. I shouldn't say bads, but, just things maybe I wasn't as happy about. What about yourself, Chris?
I like the chassis on it. I've always been a big fan of the steel chassis. There's just a lot of comfort that's given there, where some of the aluminum chassis, you just get a more rigid feel, a lot more kickback, into the bike. Where the steel, you have that flexibility that just kind of works its way around the track, kind of almost adds a little bit of a suspension, if you will. The motor, I thought, was more exciting than the gas, especially being able to, play with the maps. The traction control is kind of a nice feature. So my favorite setting was map 2 with traction control, depending on what time of day. Forks and shock, again, really good for being the air fork. Made a slight changes at Kahia. I really like the bike because Kahia is such a fast track, and the motor just revs to the moon, so you can carry so much momentum without having to shift. But you're still able to have a little bit more snap to get up some of the step-ups. Today what we did at Paris was actually raise the fork in the triple clamp to get the bike to turn more, get the weight a little bit more on the front, and actually got to finish the ruts, because there's a lot of ruts today. For me, I ranked it, I want to say third, but it was tough. My third place or second place, I guess you would want to say, was kind of a tie, and there was just little nuances that set them apart for me. And the bike that KTM lost out to for me was the Cowie, and that really just came down to motor and some of the chassis stuff.
Yeah, like I said, for me, it was fourth, just right outside the podium. We just finished up talking about that gas, and huge fan of it. Not that I'm not the KTM, but it's like the little nuances on why I said I like the gas better is why I didn't like the KTM as much. It is, like you said, chrome alloy steel frames have been really good for comfort. I've been a proponent of this since this generation of frame we're on right now. I like the prior one better. The head stay on this one's a little stiffer for me. I feel like I lost a little front end feeling. The gas, like I said, where it's the cheaper rims, the cast clamps, or something about it that
gives you that feeling back a little bit.
I can feel where the front end is. On the KTM, I lose that a little bit. There's a little bit of rigidity on the front, and that's kind of, I didn't make big changes because I kind of found no matter what direction I went, it wasn't the fork. But I tried, go a little softer, go a little stiffer. Let's change the rebound a little. Let me try up and down air pressure. And I was like, no, it's not quite getting it for me. Not that the fork action's great on it. Back to say about the air fork being so good now, like I can't complain anything that it does. I was just trying to find this front end sensation that it just wasn't quite there, and I just kind of landed like, okay, it doesn't exist on this bike for me, and that's a total personal preference. The power, it's a very linear Austrian feel. A little bit more exciting with the maps, has the open air box, has a little bit different head pipe than the gas. It's a little bit quicker revving. I appreciate that a bit at Paris. Like I said, little jumpy tracks. I don't use a lot of clutch, so I'm not the kind of guy that jumps on this. If it's not coming up, I'm not just going to start hammering the clutch and drag it through a corner. I want the bike, if I want to turn the throttle harder, I want the bike to go pick up and do its job. But at Kahia, where you're flowing so much, it was just turn the throttle and hang off the back and just let it sing. I said there was a jump on that track. The gas and the KTM were the only two I could hit it from a far inside because I would just leave it in second gear all the way out of the rut, all the way up the jump face. Everything else, I'm looking for that shift. Again, the power and the gearing spread is so open. Not even a second thought in my brain. I tried on a couple of bikes, and I'd rev out an endo. That thing, I had so much confidence that it was going to make it up and over.
I'd have to agree with Michael a lot. The KTM, I have kind of a love-hate, and one thing, too, is we have to be super open-minded to the fact that we have 2 days to ride 7 bikes and you're hopping off one thing to another. So I try to keep open-minded about it, but I have kind of a love-hate with it. It's some days I feel like it is very, very rigid, which it is, especially compared to its brother, the Gas Gas. You feel that rigidity in the frame, and like you had talked about with the steel frames, they do give a lot more than the aluminum frames, but it does feel rigid. And if you don't get that ride height on the rear end adjusted, it does feel, to me, a little bit choppered, where the front end kind of picks up, and it makes it feel light. So getting that ride balance adjusted on the KTM was a big thing for me, and I ended up at about 98 was about the farthest that I could go. And from there, I had to stiffen up the high speed on the shock a little bit to get it to sit up in the stroke. And once I did that, and few out to speed up the forks on the rebound, and that got the front wheel planted, and from there it was good. So it definitely is rigid compared to the Gas Gas, and for me that's why I rank the Gas Gas higher. I think from track toughness, the Kauai is obviously a lot more wide open, small chatter. All the bikes seem to do okay there, but when you get to Paris, it was obviously super deep this morning, coming in, a lot of holes, and it was a little bit more rigid for me. So power-wise, the KTM obviously, to me, feels like one of the fastest, and I feel like map 2 almost at Paris is almost like too much on that bike. So, and what's wild is I usually adjust the pressure to 10.3, 10.2 on the bar, and I found out today that 10.5 is good, and adjusting it from there, I like that height for the 2 tracks that we rode, which in the past, you and I have talked about that, Sean, where I usually like about 10.3 with the balance and then getting the adjustability from there, but I stayed with 10.5 and it was totally okay.
Yeah, for me, I mean, the KTM, it's hard. Like, this is where all these bikes are really good, and there's not a lot of things that any of them do bad. And the KTM, the only thing that really kind of put it down on my list was a little bit of that rigidity when compared to, like, it's almost, it sucks that KTM Gas Gas and Husky are so similar, because if one does something a little bit better than the other, you're like, well, I like that one better. Like, why would I choose another bike? So with KTM, it does a lot of things similar to the Gas Gas for me, but the Gas Gas has more comfort. So that's why I would put it down a little bit. Just it's a little bit doesn't have as much front end feel, a little bit harder. And I agree with you that I like the older generation chassis. That, you know, I kind of got a little bit more bite from the front end. But other than that, I mean, it makes great power. You scream it out, faster tracks. Even today at Paris, I was thinking that, you know, maybe some of the tighter turns and the jumps right out of turns that I'd be like searching for more power, but it's like quiet, like we talked about with the Gas Gas, but it still makes that power and you're not searching for more.
Question for you all about power characteristic, talking about the difference between like a linear versus a snappy, or a bike that feels like it has more of a peak point. Like I said, I think the KTMs or any of the Austrian ones have that real linear power. It never that feels like it's ending, but at the same time, it never feels like ultra exciting, like it's building more than what it was before. Where a lot of the Japanese bikes, you jump on them and they have peaky points. Like you can come up to a jump face on those, and lack of a better audio term, I'd say like bikes like yeah, and there's a response and a snap if you have it in the right spot. Where the KTM, Husky, and Gas Gas are more of a and they just kind of tractor and build forward. Like for me, that's where I always say, like, I rank those bikes down a little bit, because just my personal preference is I like the response. I like the peak when I want to pop over something. If I want to hit a little braking bump and jump in a corner, where do you guys all weigh in that difference in power character? Does it mean anything to you? Or
yeah, I would completely agree. I mean, I think for me, like Yamaha, Kawasaki, and Honda all made power like that way, that you can just, when you twist the throttle, the power was there. Like, you're not waiting on it.
Low to mid.
Yeah, you're not waiting on it. It's just almost immediate. But as long as you look down and see what color bike you're on and you're used to the KTM, I know from experience that, okay, if I want that, I just need to be in a lower gear or higher in the RPMs.
I think I can add to the, like you're saying with the experience thing. Like last year, I hadn't spent a lot of time on any of the Austrian bikes, more Japanese bikes. And when I originally got on the Austrian bikes, I'm like, they're kind of slow. But that's just because I was used to how the other bikes were making power. But then once you figure out where the power is on those bikes, then you realize they're actually almost faster, but the power characteristics of how it's being delivered is different. And it's almost a mind change thing where you have to realize, like you said, when you said experience, I'm like, yeah, I can see that. Because last year I was like, man, they're not very exciting, but it's a different riding style. It's a different feel, 100%.
Thank you for joining us for another roundtable. Like I said at the beginning, there is multiple of these, one for every single motorcycle, whichever one you've just watched. If you want to learn about the next most interesting bike, make sure you hit our video playlist, look around. There's plenty of them in there. If you want to check out our full detailed article, dyno charts, weights, all the stuff you want to read through, that's on our site at vitalmx.com. The link is in the bio below. And once again, if you like what we do here, please subscribe, hit like. It really helps us, and we get to keep cranking out great content like this.